The G7 is supporting an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon. That's according to a draft statement after a meeting of foreign ministers. The world's 7 leading industrialised nations have been holding talks in Italy for a second day.
On Lebanon, there is no excuses for a ceasefire. On the proposal agreement brokered by the US and France, Israel has all security concerns. There is not an excuse for not implementing a ceasefire. Otherwise, Lebanon will fall apart.
Let's bring in Hashem Ahelbarra now. He's our correspondent in Fiuggi in Italy. So, Hashem, we've got the G7 urging an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon. What are the foreign ministers there saying about the situation?
Well, Laura, in the final communique, they say that they would like to see an implementation of a ceasefire in Gaza and also an implementation of the resolution 2735 and also the Biden comprehensive agreement that he advanced in May, which calls for immediate ceasefire in Gaza, followed by release of Israeli captives in exchange for humanitarian aid, and then followed by a final phase which paves the way for the reconstruction of Gaza. Now, when it comes to Lebanon, the G7 say they remain pretty much concerned about the escalation there, and they are calling on all the parties to take advantage of the opportunity that is presented to them to agree on a ceasefire agreement. They also say in their statement that the Lebanese army has to play a central role in the implementation of the agreement by deploying in the southern part of the country once Hezbollah fighters pull out from north of the Litani River, and that the United Nations peacekeeping forces, the UNIFIL, have to have a significant play. Now, Laura, when you look at the makeup of the G7 countries, the Italians contribute the biggest number of troops, and this is why they are playing a key role in putting together elements of that agreement as far as Lebanon is concerned. The Americans are instrumental in whatever happens next in Lebanon and Gaza, and the French were keen on convincing the Lebanese government to accept the terms of the agreement, which they say or they think could be announced any time later today.
And Hashem, of course, this is not the only thing that the G7 foreign ministers have been talking about. What else has been on their agenda?
Indeed, a wide range of issues. Today was also about Ukraine, where the G7 leaders condemned the Russian army for its latest round of intermediate-range ballistic missiles that were fired into Ukraine on the 21st of November. They also condemned the presence of North Korean troops along with the Russians, but they also were very critical of Chinese support for the Russians. But they refrained from condemning China, but they said that they will target in the future Chinese actors and institutions for their support for the Russian army. They also said in their statement that they remain pretty much concerned about Iran's growing role in the Middle East, its support for the militias in the Middle East, also for Iran's assistance for the Russians, and that the G7 will continue to use all the mechanisms it has to put more pressure on the Iranian government to refrain from its policies in the Middle East and also as far as Russia is concerned. So you get a sense here that as far as the G7 is concerned, they understand ultimately that they can tap into the mechanisms they have, and which are basically sanctions, freezing the assets of countries and institutions, but using also their political and financial leverage to try to bring about solutions. And this is why today the biggest focus has been ultimately seeing whether there's going to be an announcement about a ceasefire in Lebanon first, hoping that this could be followed by another agreement on Gaza. But I have to say that the people we've been talking to, they say that while they remain pretty much optimistic that there's going to be an announcement about Lebanon, they remain very skeptical about the potential for an agreement on Gaza. And this explains why, in their final statement, they have been calling on Qatar and Egypt, the key mediators on the Gaza peace talks, to use their leverage to try ensure that there's going to be an agreement as far as Gaza is concerned. Laura?
OK, Hashem, many thanks indeed. Hashem Ahelbarra joining us there from the G7 foreign ministers meeting in Italy.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.